Okay, please welcome Nickel Boy cinematographer Jomo Fray. Oh, Nickel Boys. Oh my gosh, that first hour. I still have it in my head. Such incredible work on that film, Jomo. Talk about working with Ramel and that first conversation he had about his vision.
Oh man, it was truly a dream working with him. Like I had been such a massive fan of his first movie, Hill County, this evening, that I remember the first time I saw it, it was at Sundance, and I almost fell into a fugue state where the movie had ended. And then I looked around and the lights had come up, everyone was gone. I just stayed sitting there. There was something about the images that he made in that movie that I hadn't quite seen before. There was a specificity there. So, working with him was so incredible to try to build something now together after just being such an incredibly massive fan of his work beforehand. But, the first conversation we had was okay, so he was like, yeah, so I want to do this film in full POV. What do you think about that? And I was like, I don't know what to think about that. And he was like, well, how would you do it? And I was like, well, it'd probably be having a lot of conversations about what that meant. And he was like, yeah, that definitely makes sense. Okay, cool. And that kind of started what almost feels like an unending conversation even to this moment with Ramel. And so it was really kind of trying to get in deep with what does, not only why did he want to do POV, but what does POV mean for this movie? And I think pretty quickly we kind of started figuring out that it wasn't point of view that was important, but it was more that the idea of the image having a certain sentience to it, the image almost feeling like it has a consciousness to it, and trying to create an image that didn't look like how it looks to see, but kind of feels like what sight feels like what memory feels like, which is, a slightly different thing.
And we've talked about this before, like the film shifts the sentient image when we talk about that visual shift and how you execute that vision. Because when we see the world go from the younger Elwood to Turner's, and how you make that change without jarring the audience.
Yeah, it was always just kind of trying to first and foremost have the conversation of what is the emotional imprint of this moment and what's the emotional almost perspective of the person that we're in the mind of. So like, whether it was some of the things in the movie when they're just boys and it's from Elwood's perspective, or some of the stuff later in the movie where it's from Elwood as an adult perspective, which was, a completely different camera rig where the camera's on the back of the actor, was really a first and foremost a question of like, what's their emotional life like? And after an experience like Nickel Academy, like how do they probably understand their own relationship to their own life, their own subjectivity? What's the nature of trauma? How does trauma kind of affect you over time? And I think that that's true for both characters on Elwood and Turner, where they both have such different perspectives on how they see the world. So it's like trying to imbue the image with, from Elwood's perspective, maybe a certain optimism, and imbuing the image with a certain kind of systemic cynicism in Turner's. But again, more than anything, just trying to base it on what are these people feeling going through their world.
I love the visual world of Nickel Boys. Talk about what you shot on and why, and the cameras. Take us into the tech side a little bit.
Oh my God. Um, we shot on the Sony Venice, and we shot on Sony Venice.
Applause, go for the applause. Sony Venice fans.
Sony Venice is in the house. We shot on the Sony Venice, and for lenses, we shot on a set of, at the time, prototype lenses at Panavision called the Panavision VA lenses, which were, incredible and special and strange. And the thing that I loved about those lenses were that it was an instance where Dan Sasaki, the kind of head lens designer at Panavision, was trying a fundamentally different lens design than he's ever kind of tried. And the thing I loved about the lenses was they had a real volume to them. And by that I don't mean that the spaces are three-dimensional, it's that you had a sense of subjective depth. And why that became important in a movie like Nickel Boys is it's like, again, all these conversations, you start to just dive down deeper for everything when you're thinking about, okay, shooting a child's perspective. It isn't that you are short, and it's not that you're small, it's that you're small relative to everything else around you. So when you're a child and shooting some of those perspectives early on in Nickel Boys, it's more about that an adult should feel like a giant. Buildings should feel huge. If you're seeing bed sheets above you, those bed sheets should feel like they can almost envelop the entire world. And we needed a set of lenses that could make you feel that kind of relative space, because with the POV, it's really a question of the camera's inside the scenes. The camera is quite literally moving through and navigating space. So being able to feel those spaces, and production designer Nora Mendes's work just became that much more important, because it's like these spaces, since we don't maybe have a traditional establishing shot because we're shooting in POV, all of a sudden it's like Ramel and I having conversations about, okay, well, what is an establishing shot? Like, let's break that down to an almost subatomic level and then rebuild it for this language. So it's like, okay, for me, an establishing shot is usually about trying to understand a character as they relate to an environment around them. And because we can't do that shot, it's like, okay, well, maybe the shot actually is the camera walking into a space, looking at a marble countertop, and then looking at the people behind the countertop, and then maybe we see the edge of the character's shirt in the side of the frame, and maybe that tells us a little bit about the socioeconomics of us as a character. The marble countertop and how everyone else is dressed tells about the socioeconomics of the space. And then maybe as a viewer, you kind of start to tell a story to yourself of what's the relationship, how comfortable or uncomfortable are these people with us in the space. And so all of a sudden you start to get the information that you would get in an establishing shot in this different kind of shot. But things like costume and production design became so important. So everything kind of felt hand in hand with the camera system, the lenses, feeling the space in themselves, and like trying to build all of these stories together, so that in lieu of having these more traditional assets like a close-up, like an establishing shot or like an insert, but to still transfer that information to the viewer so that they felt grounded and they knew where they were, when they were, and why they were.
Amazing. Oh my God, I've just learned so much from that. Thank you so much, Jomo. I will see you back here for the group conversation. Now let's take a look at A Complete Unknown.